In the lonely plains of 1878 Wyoming, a wandering cowboy stopped at a ranch owned by a widow who had lost everything except her land and her hope. When he told her the ranch was too big for one person, she answered with words that would change both of their lives forever. "Then stay and take care of it. And me." What began as a few weeks of work became a story of hardship, loyalty, and unexpected love on the American frontier. If you enjoy heartfelt Western stories filled with courage and romance, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more unforgettable tales from the Old West. Let's get started. Autumn of 1878 settled across the plains of Wyoming territory, and the wind carried the scent of dry grass and distant rain. I had spent nearly 10 years drifting from ranch to ranch, mending fences, breaking horses, and sleeping beneath more open skies than I could count. A man who owned nothing could ride anywhere, but he belonged nowhere. That evening, my horse carried me along the Sweetwater River, where a sprawling ranch spread across the valley like a kingdom abandoned by its king. A single lantern glowed on the porch. The woman holding it wore a dark dress, and though she stood straight, weariness hung upon her shoulders. I removed my hat. "Ma'am," I said, looking over the endless fields and distant cattle, "your ranch is too big for one person." For a moment she said nothing. Then her gray eyes met mine, and she whispered, "Then stay and take care of it. And me." Her name was Clara Whitmore. Her husband had died the previous winter after a fever swept through the territory, leaving behind land, cattle, and a mountain of debt. She told me the bank in Lander had given her until spring to make the next payment. If she failed, the ranch would be sold. I had intended to ride on at sunrise, yet something in her voice made me agree to stay for a few weeks. The next morning, I discovered just how much work waited. Fences had fallen in several pastures, the north barn leaked badly, and half the cattle had wandered farther than they should have. Clara worked beside me without complaint, though I could see exhaustion in every step. Days turned into weeks. I repaired broken rails, patched the barn roof, and brought the straying herd home before a storm could scatter them across the hills. Each evening Clara cooked supper, and we ate by lamplight while the prairie wind rattled the windows. At first, we spoke only of cattle prices and weather. Later, she began telling stories of her husband, of the ranch when it was full of hired hands and laughter. One snowy evening, she admitted, almost in a whisper, that she feared losing everything her family had built. I looked at the fire, then at the woman who had carried this burden alone for nearly a year. "No bank will take this place while I still have strength in my hands," I said. For the first time since I arrived, Clara smiled without sadness. By the summer of 1879, the Whitmore Ranch had changed in ways I could hardly believe. The fences stood straight, the north barn no longer leaked, and the cattle grazed fat and healthy across the Wyoming grasslands. We had worked from dawn until dark through winter and spring, selling a strong herd in Lander and paying enough of the debt to keep the bank satisfied. Yet the greatest change was not in the ranch. It was in Clara. The lonely widow who once carried a lantern through silent rooms now laughed when a stubborn calf escaped the corral. She sang softly while baking bread, and sometimes I caught her smiling at me when she thought I was not looking. I told myself I was only a hired hand helping her save her land, but each passing week made it harder to imagine riding away. One hot afternoon, a wealthy rancher from Cheyenne arrived in a polished carriage. He walked the property with the confidence of a man who believed everything had a price. After examining the herd and the pasture, he offered Clara more money than I had ever seen written on a single sheet of paper. "A widow shouldn't carry such a burden alone," he said. "Sell the ranch to me and live comfortably in town." Clara listened politely while I stood near the corral, pretending not to hear. At last she folded the paper and handed it back. "Thank you, sir," she said, "but this ranch already has what it needs." The man looked surprised, then mounted his horse and rode away in a cloud of dust. After he disappeared beyond the hill, I asked, "Do you realize how much money you just turned down?" Clara looked across the pasture where our horses grazed side by side. "When my husband died," she said quietly, "I thought this place would bury me in loneliness. Then a wandering cowboy rode through and told me my ranch was too big." I laughed softly. "I remember." She stepped closer and took my rough hand in hers. "You stayed anyway," she whispered. That evening, beneath a Wyoming sunset painted gold and crimson, Clara asked me to remain for good. I answered before she could finish the question. We were married before the first autumn frost. The ranch became ours, and the drifting cowboy who had never belonged anywhere finally found a home beside the widow he had come to save.